Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents How to Talk to Your Kids About Your Divorce. Healthy, Effective Communication Techniques for Your Changing Family. By Dr. Samantha Rodman. Narrated by Melanie, Carey. Introduction. If you're listening to this book, it's because you're struggling with the idea or the reality of divorce and concerned about the impact it will have on your children. First, let me say how sorry I am that you're in this place. An extensive history of marital conflict, disappointment, and hurt usually precedes one or both partners deciding to divorce. Divorce is one of life's most painful and harrowing experiences, and, according to research, only the death of a spouse is more stressful. And I would be willing to bet that divorce can take the number one place in many circumstances. No matter how many other issues are racing through your mind right now, and there are likely more than you can count, you've chosen to set aside time to listen to a book on communicating with your kids about divorce. This indicates that you're fully committed to maintaining the psychological and emotional well-being of your children during this difficult time, and that you want to minimize the disruption and pain that your divorce will cause. As a psychologist, I commend you on taking this step to proactively work on easing your children's distress about your divorce. Many parents avoid thinking about the painful reality of their children's anxiety and confusion during this process and just hope for the best. Unfortunately, a less proactive approach often means that children have no idea what is happening and end up feeling lost, betrayed, and angry. Thankfully, there are many concrete tools that you can use in order to communicate effectively with your children about the topics of separation and divorce, whether they are toddlers only starting to talk, elementary school age, or teenagers. This book aims to reduce your stress in at least this one area. If you know that you're facilitating open and developmentally appropriate communication with your kids, you can feel confident that you have tried your hardest to help them through this difficult process. These tools are simple and straightforward, and, best of all, they can be used to communicate with kids about any topic, not only divorce. Whether or not your co-parent listens to this book or is on board with the advice that it gives, you can still use it very effectively to help yourself and your child have a healthier and more open relationship. Of course, the stress of conflict with your co-parent cannot be overstated, and this book will also cover ways to decrease some of this conflict. Although it's easier said than done, if you are able to feel more positive or even more neutral toward your co-parent, this can be perhaps the most important thing that you do for the psychological well-being of your children. This book will also include many anonymized questions, quotes, and examples from real-life veterans of divorce and adult children of divorce, the readers of drpsychmom.com, and examples I have fictionalized that touch upon issues I have discussed over the years with clients going through divorces. These examples provide glimpses of the experiences of people who have been in the trenches of separation and divorce. Hopefully, they will resonate with your personal experiences and help give voice to your own struggles. By the end of this book, you'll be able to understand what children commonly feel when their parents divorce, discuss divorce-related topics, for example, separate homes, visits, why this happened, in age-appropriate ways with your child. Initiate conversations where your children can feel safe in expressing their honest feelings about the divorce. Realize the dangers of confiding too deeply in your child and change this dynamic. Know when and how to get help for your own divorce-related emotional struggles. Know how emotions work and how to teach emotional awareness and acceptance to your child. Understand how children may express their feelings in different ways based on their ages and personalities. Empathize with your child's experience without trying to fix or minimize it. Validate your child's feelings, making your child feel safe and secure. Understand why I keep referring to your ex-spouse as a co-parent throughout this book, and why it's so important to use this term yourself. Understand the difference between forcing your children to communicate and allowing them the space to come to you. Feel confident that you've opened up the lines of communication with your child, not only about divorce, but about all difficult or sensitive issues. Discuss hot-button topics with your child without losing your cool. Incorporate more positive bonding activities into your post-divorce life with your child. Realize that your divorce will not break your child, and realize that the way you talk about the divorce may actually strengthen and deepen your relationship with your child. I see many adult clients who were children of divorce, and for everyone that felt traumatized by the divorce, there is one who feels that, in fact, the divorce was a positive thing, as the child ended up with two happier parents, and often loving step-parents. The common denominators among happy and well-adjusted adult children of divorce are that they did not feel ignored, caught in the middle of sparring parents, or expected or forced to act or feel a certain way. Their perspectives and emotions were heard and understood rather than minimized, denied, or devalued, and their preferences were taken into account in developmentally appropriate ways. These are worthy goals for any divorcing parent, to try your hardest to make your child feel heard, acknowledged, prioritized, and safe. Note: throughout this book, male and female pronouns will be used interchangeably. Unless otherwise specified, the issues discussed apply to both male and female children. Additionally, there are specific times that I recommend seeking help from a therapist. By this, I mean a trained professional, a psychologist, social worker, or licensed counselor, who preferably has experience working with divorcing families. Even if I do not explicitly recommend counseling for an issue you may be going through, please always seek counseling if you feel that it is necessary to help you and your child through a particularly challenging time. Now, let's begin setting the stage for understanding how to communicate with your child about your divorce. Part 1. Talking about divorce. In the first part of this book, we will be preparing you to learn to communicate with and understand your child in new ways. We will cover types of divorce, how spoken language can change how you and your child feel about the divorce, and ways to ensure that your relationship with your child maintains appropriate boundaries amidst the chaos of divorce. This section also addresses the unique influence of divorce on different kids' personality types and offers a basic primer about the critical role of emotional expression and acceptance in helping your child cope and heal. These 7 chapters will give you a broad overview of everything to look out for as you and your child embark on or continue the journey of creating your post-divorce family. Chapter 1. Divorce, not one size fits all. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Anna Karenina, by Leo Tolstoy. Divorce is not a one-size-fits-all construct. The relationship between spouses and, later, co-parents, the amount and type of conflict in the marriage and in the divorce, the relationship between each parent and each child, and the relationship between siblings can all influence how children are affected by their parents' divorce. Types of unhappy marriages. There are many issues that can contribute to the dissolution of a marriage, including, but not limited to, infidelity, physical and/or emotional, lack of emotional connection, opposing ideas about major household issues, finances, parenting, work-life balance, involvement of grandparents, and issues related to mental and emotional health, addiction, mood and anxiety disorders, personality level variables, codependency. Despite the range of reasons that your marriage may have ended, your children often only notice one variable, whether or not they have witnessed extensive open conflict. Therefore, we will classify unhappy marriages into two main types, ones where the conflict is right out in the open, and ones where it is hidden, either behind closed doors or not even discussed by the spouses themselves. The openly conflictual home. In this marriage, there is open and acrimonious fighting. There is yelling, threatening, and arguing, and possibly violence between spouses. Parents may insult one another or act contemptuous or dismissive of one another. Often, at least one parent badmouths the other to the children, or engages in passive-aggressive behavior like rolling their eyes when the other parent talks, or undermining one another's parenting decisions. Old problems are endlessly rehashed, including such issues as infidelity, disagreements about finances, or difficulties with in-laws. These arguments occur either directly in front of the kids or when the kids are asleep, but they hear it anyway. The word divorce may have been used, and more than once, within the kids' earshot. Sometimes there is no physical affection, and sometimes there is unpredictable physical affection, and even passion, since volatile relationships often are characterized by high highs and low lows. This latter situation can be even more confusing for children, as they never know whether mom and dad love each other or not, and may learn to associate physical intimacy with fear or conflict. The children in these families can respond in a variety of ways to this constant conflict. Sometimes all the children take their cue from the oldest child, and sometimes siblings respond differently. There are typical ways that children respond to conflict in the home, and they represent different coping styles that they have developed with the unconscious or conscious goal of making their situation better, either by limiting its impact on them or by changing or fixing the problems between their parents. Some children ignore the conflict entirely, no matter how loud or violent the fighting gets. Parents may tell themselves that this means that their children don't notice or aren't affected by the conflict. However, despite their outward appearance of not caring, these children are learning that this conflict is what it means to be in a relationship. They often exhibit the same stress reactions as other children, but parents don't link these to the conflict in the home, since these children appear not to react to the fighting. Other children take sides, defending and comforting one parent and blaming and demonizing the other. They may be used to viewing one parent as the victim and one as the perpetrator in the frequent arguments. They may say, "Leave mommy alone," to their father, or roll their eyes at their mother when she comes after dad. A pattern where one parent and one or all children stand together against another parent is called triangulation and can be very toxic to the kid's emotional health. This is an early precursor to children reviling one parent after a divorce, parental alienation, as discussed in Chapter 7. Another often seen dynamic is where children try to repair the relationship between their parents. They explain one parent's viewpoint to the other and try to smooth over conflicts. Sometimes a child will take a comedian role, hoping to lessen tension between parents by cracking jokes. Other kids become troublemakers with the same unconscious goal, distracting their parents from fighting. This can temporarily work, as parents come together to discipline or complain about their child's misbehavior. It is noteworthy and shows how difficult marital conflict is on a child that a child generally wants his parents to get along even more than he wants them to approve of his behavior. In some openly conflictual households, some children, particularly older siblings or oldest female children, act older than their years. They may try to shield younger ones from the fighting, or care for younger siblings when parents' distress renders them unable to function appropriately as caretakers. They may feed or bathe younger siblings, do homework with them, or put them to bed. Children in openly conflictual homes also can become parentified, a psychological term which means that they act as a parent to their own parent, taking care of them emotionally, or even fixing them meals or cleaning the house when a parent feels too distressed to function. They may also take on a confidant-like role with one or both parents, where they provide comfort and a shoulder to lean on for a parent who is struggling. Such parents feel so lonely and distraught that they welcome any caretaking behavior, even when they know that their children should not be providing this sort of comfort. Whether or not the children acknowledge and respond to the marital discord in an openly conflictual home, it is likely that they are exhibiting some stress-related reactions, like anxiety, anger, acting out in school, sleep problems, inability to focus on schoolwork, and interpersonal issues with peers. They are soaking everything up and learning that conflict and dissatisfaction are the basis of a marriage. This is a lesson that is very hard to unlearn, since it is absorbed on such an unconscious level at a formative developmental stage. Children in an openly conflictual home have more forewarning that their parents may divorce, since they may have overheard threats about divorce during arguments, or they may be old enough to know that fighting can lead to divorce. Still, the news that their parents are actually divorcing will be painful and surprising. Kids cherish fantasies that one day their parents will just start to get along and everyone will be happy. Knowing that this will never happen is like a punch in the gut, no matter how unhappy the household has been. However, long term, if their post-divorce life becomes calmer and more stable than their pre-divorce life, kids in this situation may feel that their parents made the right choice for everyone. It is normal to feel guilty after listening to the description of an openly conflictual marriage. While it is true that being exposed to constant fighting, anger, and bitterness is bad for children's mental and even physical health, you cannot change the past, and it is a good thing that you were brave enough to move forward with divorce. Now, your kids will have a chance to realize that the patterns they saw in your household were not representative of a healthy marriage. You can discuss what they saw and explain that your marriage wasn't healthy. Moreover, you can commit to changing these patterns from this point forward in your post-divorce family and relationships. The secretly unhappy home. This family is very different from the openly conflictual home. On the surface, it looks like a happy family, headed by a couple that is loving and even affectionate. But this is not what is going on underneath. In this relationship, although parents put on a happy face in front of everyone, including their kids, the spouses feel lonely and despondent. Sometimes I think of these types of couples as divorced in spirit. Often, the partners sleep in separate rooms and have no intimacy or physical contact. Despite this, their kids may have no idea that their parents are not in love, and only later on, such as in therapy, will they note that they never saw their parents kiss or touch. They often don't think this is abnormal, having grown up with it, and they assume that if there was any conflict between their parents, there would have been open fighting. A secretly unhappy marriage can keep on trucking for a long time, because both partners are emotionally avoidant and hate confrontation. If one partner asks for a divorce, it's usually due to some major life change, like starting a new job, starting therapy, or, of course, starting another romantic relationship. The other partner, who was equally unhappy but may have made peace with remaining in an unhappy marriage for the sake of the kids, finances, or any other reason, may now feel extremely angry and betrayed. This is how a secretly unhappy marriage can lead to a high-conflict divorce. Kids with parents in secretly unhappy marriages will be completely blindsided by a divorce. These children often feel very secure about their parents' relationship and may have even felt lucky to have a non-divorced and loving family, distinguishing them from their classmates with divorced parents. No matter their ages, the children will be extremely confused and feel shaken to the core because, as far as everyone knew, there were no problems at all. In A Generation at Risk, Growing Up in an Era of Family Upheaval, 1997, authors Paul R. Amato and Alan Booth discuss that post-divorce, children of low-conflict marriages have worse outcomes as adults than children of high-conflict marriages due to issues with trust and intimacy. Additionally, if you've tried to keep your marital conflict hidden from your children, they may wonder what else you've been keeping hidden. Issues of trust may emerge, particularly for older kids or teens, who may wonder if anything else or everything else in their lives was a lie. In this situation, kids have no idea what to think, and often their anger and confusion can manifest against one parent in particular, whichever one they can more easily blame. For example, a teenager may think, "It must be Dad's fault. I know he worked so much, and I bet Mom was lonely." In secretly unhappy marriages that lead to divorce, there may be more questions from the children than in openly conflictual marriages. As we will discuss in subsequent chapters, these questions must be addressed honestly and respectfully, as the children have a right to know developmentally appropriate information about why their family is breaking up. Addiction and mental illness. A particularly heartbreaking type of openly conflictual marriage is a marriage where one or both parents struggle with addiction or mental illness. These issues can render parents unable to effectively care for themselves and their children. Their judgment is compromised, and younger children may not have any idea why their parents are so unpredictable and scary. Families in which one or both parents suffer from addiction or mental illness can fall into either category of marriage headed toward divorce, openly conflictual or secretly unhappy. For example, alcoholic parents may fight loudly and violently in front of their children, or one parent may be distant and detached, drinking alone out of the kid's sight. Similarly, a parent with bipolar disorder may have unpredictable and volatile anger issues, while a parent with depression may spend time lying silently on the couch. Again, the more that open conflict occurs, the likelier the children will be to have some inkling that a divorce may be on the horizon, unless the children are very young. But it will likely still be shocking and painful. We will discuss the unique issues associated with mental illness and addiction in Chapter 7. 3 types of divorce. I have observed 3 different types of divorce among the couples that I see in treatment: amicable, strained, and high conflict. They each have a specific impact on the children's ability to cope and thrive post-divorce. Sadly, according to Amato and Booth in A Generation at Risk, 30% of divorces are considered high conflict, and up to 60% are considered moderate to high conflict. So amicable divorces are in the minority. Learning about what type of divorce you are going through can help you understand how your children will react and why. The amicable divorce. In this situation, the divorce was mutually agreed upon and was likely years in the making. Both spouses are still friends but are not in love anymore. Usually, this is not a situation where there was domestic violence, infidelity, or extensive dishonesty. It usually results from a secretly unhappy home or marriage where the conflict was hidden or contained. Often, both spouses have a social support network of friends and family and/or their own therapists. These buffers allow them to be magnanimous with each other and to pin the blame for the divorce on their situation or lack of compatibility, not just the other partner's perceived deficiencies. This is a best-case scenario and is fairly uncommon. While the children certainly suffer and mourn the loss of their non-divorced family, they do not have to simultaneously contend with parental anger and bitterness. They are not exposed to parents trash-talking one another, which allows them to remain emotionally close with both parents. This is the best outcome a child of divorce can hope for. The strained divorce. In this scenario, which is much more common, both spouses feel some animosity and bitterness, but this can be contained. particularly in front of the children. There is no overwhelming hatred, and each spouse can see the other's positive qualities, at least some of the time. In this situation, the children can remain emotionally healthy and happy after a period during which they grieve their family's breakup and acclimate to new routines. The more they are shielded from what anger and resentment does remain between the parents, the better they can cope. The high conflict divorce. In this sad situation, a couple cannot agree upon anything in terms of co-parenting, finances, living arrangements, and so forth. There is often a history of dishonesty and infidelity, and at least one spouse feels like the victim in the marriage. The exes continue to argue in front of the kids as much as, if not more than, they did when they were married. Children find it very difficult to thrive in this type of divorce. They feel forced to take sides and to blame one parent for the fighting and hostility. Kids will often develop psychological, emotional, and even physical problems from the stress of living in this type of environment. A phone call from one parent can send the other into a rage. Pickups and drop-offs are fraught with tension, snide remarks, and accusations. This is the worst of both worlds. The parents are no longer together, but the children still cannot escape the conflict. A man undergoing a high-conflict divorce may think something like this: "My wife goes out and parties like she has no kids. No wonder the kids look anxious when it's time to go back to Mom's house. I wish I could go back in time and leave the marriage sooner. Those years I will never get back. Every time I talk to her, my blood pressure goes up." If you and your co-parent fall into one of the first two categories, it is likely that the tips in this book may provide you with the communication skills necessary to connect more effectively with your children during this difficult time. Co-parents who still respect one another and who do not have a history of violence or volatility can more easily move into a co-parenting relationship that puts the children first. However, many couples have arrived at the decision to divorce at the end of a long road of contentious, violent, and devastating conflict, throughout which they have experienced intense feelings of betrayal, hatred, and rage. If you're in a high-conflict divorce like this, I highly recommend that you look for a counselor who can help you learn coping strategies to manage your emotions, particularly in front of your children. Anger, resentment, and anxiety can come to the surface in frequent open conflict. This conflict is toxic for children to witness and will have permanent negative effects on their psychological health, including their later capacity to form trusting, intimate relationships as adults. Furthermore, stress may be a trigger for the development of underlying mental and emotional issues in children with predispositions toward these issues. Many parents think that conflict with their co-parent will abate in a few months. However, in The Unexpected Legacy of Divorce, a 25-year landmark study by Judith S. Wallerstein, Julia M. Lewis, and Sandra Blakesley, the authors maintain that a third of divorced couples are still fighting with the same intensity a decade after their divorce. Adult clients often recall horribly stressful interactions between their divorced parents, from verbal snipping at school functions to open scenes at birthday parties, weddings, and even much later events such as celebrations for grandchildren born decades after a divorce. Nor does the addition of a new partner for one or both of the divorced parents lead to a ceasefire. Many times, the introduction of new partners brings up or exacerbates feelings of jealousy and anger, particularly insofar as the new arrangement affects finances and the treatment of children. When to get help. If you have lost your temper frequently with your co-parent in front of your children, the first order of business must be working with a trained professional in order to get you to a healthier emotional place. Even if you're in bad financial circumstances, there are many therapists with sliding scale fees, and even therapists who take pro bono cases. You can find psychologists and counselors who provide therapy for free by researching pro bono therapy in your area. A therapist is not only someone who can teach you concrete skills for dealing with your anger and guilt.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?